span X amount of miles.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Warrenville Public Works Infrastructure Committee of the Whole regular meeting. It's Monday, August 14th. May I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Bevere.
Here.
Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Hoffman.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. And would you please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have our D on our agenda for citizens' comments, and I don't have anyone listed here to make a comment, but if anyone would like to make a comment during any of the items that are on the business of the meeting, all they have to do is let us know, and they will have the opportunity to speak. Thank you. Officials and staff comments. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of things coming up in Warrenville. Free events, always good things for us. Art on the Prairie is rolling around again on September 16th. That's a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. right across from City Hall. Always a lot of fun. Did I mention that it's free? There's art on display. You can purchase arts and crafts. There are demonstrations going on. There's food. There's a children's art station. A microbrew tent. I'm assuming that's after lunch. You probably want to start at 10 with that, but it will be here. And some performing arts, some music and some dancing. So do come down. Art on the Prairie again, Saturday, September 16th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Immediately followed on the 17th by the unveiling of the Kiwanis time capsule that was buried in the gazebo when it was built. So we're going to open that up and see what kind of treasures are in there that we can share with the rest of the community. That will be at 1:30 p.m. and it will be at the gazebo because that's where it's buried. So hope to see a few of you there. And again, Saturday and Sunday coming up, 16th and 17th, some fun things going on in town. So hope to see you there.
Thank you. Clerk? Okay. Alderman. Alderman Goodman.
I have two things tonight. First, there's a new program that the county is trying to promote called Do Good, Do Page. It's a new volunteer program where they're coordinating between local volunteer organizations and anyone who's interested in helping out with those organizations. So it's on the county website if you're interested. And I know that there's an awful lot of wonderful volunteer spirit in Warrenville, so I hope people get involved. The second thing is that according to the school district, niche.com has ranked our school district, District 200, the number 10 best school district in Illinois out of 406 school districts that they rated. I think it was community unit school districts. They gave them overall an A+ average, so that's pretty good. They were given an A+ in health and safety, clubs and activities, sports, and college prep, which I thought was particularly important, and all the other various categories also had very high grades. So that was something to be proud of, and good for our school district. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Alderman Widener.
Yes, a few weeks ago, some of the aldermen and the city staff received a concern from, I think it was a library employee regarding the signage out in front of the library. There was a lot of cars that were going past at a high rate of speed, and the individual addressing the council members and the city staff asked if something might be done. And I'm pleased to read in this week's weekly report that some signage was added to alert motorists to slow down in that area. So I just wanted to thank staff for acting so quickly on this issue and taking care of it, and hopefully it'll go a long way to resolve the problem. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. City Administrator?
I have nothing to add tonight, thank you.
Okay. Staff? Okay, that's that. So on to the business of the meeting. Number 1, informational update on the Enterprise Resource Planning, the ERP process. This is going to be presented by Leo Beltran, who is our senior accountant.
Good evening. Leonardo Beltran, Senior Accountant, ERP Project Manager. You may see here on this slide, it starts off with Task 2. Task 1 is not missing. Task 1 was actually the beginning stages of this. It was a separate project, which GFOA assisted us with documenting our internal processes and procedures. And that really is the first step of this project, which we already did. So we kicked off this project August of last year. And since then, the selection team and myself have been very, very busy with the task at hand, planning and scope definition. For the ERP project, the core scope that was defined was replacing the city's current ERP system, with the core scope being replacing the financials, HR, and payroll, and optional scopes being set for utility billing, community development. This was done because community development and utility billing are kind of complex by themselves, that not all vendors have solutions for these items. And to maximize the number of responses that we got back for the RFP, these were set as optional. During November and December of last year, we helped, with our GFOA consultant, develop the requirements for this ERP system. And these requirements are basically things and functionality the ERP system should be able to do. The RFP was brought before the council in late January to be released. We did receive 8 responses back in mid-March for the RFP. Of those 8 responses, 3 were removed for consideration and evaluation because they were not for ERP solutions, they were for other products and services. So they didn't meet the criteria for this project. The 5 remaining proposals were evaluated by each of the selection team members in the month of April. Each of these proposals required each member to review the proposals and spend about 3 to 5 days on each proposal. So that's a big chunk of time. That's 25 to 15 days, depending. Some of these proposals were 400 pages plus. Some were around 100 plus. So, I mean, it's on the average, I think it was about 250 per proposal. So the selection team gathered back in late April, early May to take the top 3 vendors based on the proposals that were written and take them and invite them to demonstrations in June. The top 3 that were selected were given 3 days in June to demonstrate their software. So that would be a total of 9 days, almost 2 full weeks, in which each selection team member spent here demonstrating, asking questions, seeing what kind of functionality each of the software systems had. And from those 3 demonstrations, we've reduced the number of vendors to 2. And the next part of this project is to do discovery, which is a continuation to some extent of demonstrations. It gives the staffs, the selection team, more time to ask questions, a few more things on demonstrations if we want. And it really comes down to, it's more of a job interview at that point. And we're actually conducting discovery this week, later this week. So we hope to narrow it down to 1 vendor, bring it before the council before we start negotiations, which will be the bulk of the remaining part of August, the bulk of September, and first part of October. And we hope to have a contract statement of work presented before the city council for approval late October. And then the real fun begins commencing January 2018, and when we actually start implementing the software. So it's been a long process from when we started Task 1 back in 2015, so to where we are now. And I'd just like to thank the selection team for their time. It's been grueling in certain points. So I got more detail involved in my memo. But if you have any questions regarding my memo, feel free to contact me or Kevin, Finance Director Kevin Delstrand.
This is an information only, but if anyone
Yes.
has any questions.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Leo, just for the folks at home, remind them exactly what we're doing and why.
Oh, we're replacing the current ERP system that we have now with the city MSI. It
Okay, you're
doesn't.
gonna have to put that into words.
Okay, so the backbone of our financial system, the way we record accounting transactions, do payroll, and do utility billing, it doesn't provide the functionality and features that we need to now. It's not a current system. We adopted the system back in the mid-90s, if I'm correct, Kevin. So it's time to retire it and go with something else that provides more functionality, makes the lives here of the citizen, the lives here of the staff easier, provides more information to City Council, provides more feature services to the community at large. So you're basically increasing, you're investing in efficiencies, creating more efficiencies that we just don't have now, and moving a lot of our paper-based processes to electronic workflow. And you can't beat someone approving something on their desk via writing it on a piece of paper and then handing it to someone else. So that's the main goal, is to replace the current ERP system and provide efficiencies and better workflow for the city.
So it's essentially an update of a process that is long in need of an update.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Administrator Coakley.
Hey, I was just going to add that the current system we've had for many, couple of decades, but it's no longer supported by the company that's operating it now. So at some point, it will not be able to be updated or maintained or repaired. So this isn't just something that's important to get more efficient system. It's going to be a necessity because it won't be maintained for much longer.
Alderman Goodman?
I know when we first started talking about this RFP and when we've been discussing this in the context of the budget, we had a round figure of about $1 million in mind for this. But now that you have some proposals and have narrowed it down to 2, do you have a range of the possible financial impacts, some sort of update? Or is that still?
We do not have an update yet. The million-plus figure is still in play, and the discovery that we will do later on this week is where we hope to start to narrow down a final cost as to what this may cost. Our total budget for just the system itself was just short of $900,000 for the actual system itself. We budgeted for some contractual assistance with data entry and those types of things. And we also budgeted for the optional scope, which was the community development piece, as well as the utility billing piece. So the total we budgeted for this year was just short of $1.2 million. But we do not have a final cost narrowed down yet.
Okay, so the 2 proposals do presumably have some costs involved, but we
Yes.
haven't specified the scope with enough detail to figure out exactly which
Correct.
process would cost how much yet?
Correct.
Okay, but we do think it's going to be somewhere in the range that we already expect.
We are targeting that range, absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I think it helps in the context of this discussion to say $1 million, just so people have in mind, the importance and the heft of this particular discussion.
The vast majority of the cost of this is actually the implementation, as well as the data conversion itself. The software itself, or the ERP solution, is not the main part of the cost of the total project. It's really those first steps of making the conversion and implementing then that conversion.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. So when we first heard about this, there were a lot of goals that you guys had, that the staff had, that the different departments had. And as you've interviewed these firms and you're zeroing in on the one that you want, do you feel that in general, I'm not asking for all the specifics, but in general, you're able to get and receive and implement the sorts of goals that you had, or were there any big gaps that these companies either didn't cover or we couldn't afford or whatever?
Each of the vendors had their shortcomings. There were certain things they couldn't do. There was one vendor that couldn't do, mobile. I don't want to call it like a mobile desktop for community development. They only worked on, like, I believe it was Apple. They didn't work on Android. So those are the kind of things you're not going to find a perfect fit. And through this process, it's become obvious we're not going to get everything we want. But we're going to get a lot for what we have now. We're going to get a lot more functionality and processes that we don't have right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Okay. On to number 2, informational update on the Aesthetics Enhancement Program. Assistant City Administrator Christina White, she will introduce Mike Ramick, who is the chairperson of the TAC, Tourism and Arts Commission.
Thank you. Back in 2015, the City Council requested that the Tourism and Arts Commission embark on a new journey with an aesthetic enhancement program to look at possible community artwork or another type of grant program where someone could apply to install community artwork in a public space. In 2016, the Tourism and Arts Commission brought forward a program policy for that. And since then, the Tourism and Arts Commission has been reviewing several different options for how to implement that new program. And I'm going to pass it along to TAC Chair Mike Ramick, who's here to provide additional information and kind of go through the process that the commission has gone through to get to this point.
Mike, if you'd like to step to the microphone. Thank you.
Let me just start by saying thank you. I have to start just by seeing the smiles and ideas of what we've come up with. And, you know, you guys tasked us with putting together this enhancement program, aesthetics. And, you know, I think some of us said, gee, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to put this together? But I think over the time that we've gone through with this, every single one of us, you know, you've got your agenda, you've got things like that you have to cover in any given meeting. We all look forward to the one spot where we can go, yes, now we can talk about the Aesthetics Commission. So we're very excited and we're very happy that you've given us this opportunity to go through these things. So we've taken kind of a journey, right? We've kind of gone through a lot of things. We've thought about the 2 areas in which we can put together some sort of aesthetics. One of them would be a project just on its own, right? Or one of them would be a project where we actually add to an existing city project, something like that, where we go, oh, okay, can we maybe take some streetlights and make them more decorative? Can we take some bridge, maybe things and add some decorations to them to make it a little more attractive? So we met with Director Menser, right? And we wanted to find from him what sort of projects were out there. What could we actually get involved in and work with some of the work groups and see what they would be, you know, interested in us adding something to it. Okay, but what we found out is that timing was really of the essence. So what we found is that, you know, maybe we were a little bit late in the game to get involved in existing projects, at least for this first go-around. So what we said was we'd certainly engage that in the future, but we thought at this point in time, we would kind of engage doing a project, kind of a standalone project, kind of something separate. So we kind of took the 2 groups that we were talking about originally in our policy, and we said, hey, you know what, I think we're going to try and go with the standalone project. So that's the one we engaged. So we all sat down and started to learn some things about art. You know, it's very interesting. Our group is a mixture of people. You know, you've obviously got me, who's an accountant type, but you've got Monica, who's very much into art, and you've got Linda, who really has an appreciation for it and an understanding of it and things like that. So it's really quite a mixture of people that really, everybody contributes some piece to it, which makes it quite nice. So one of the things we did was we said, well, let's start looking at who could we actually engage in this sort of an artwork and actually put something together. And we said, well, we've got to kind of figure out where we want to put it, okay? So we looked at some areas, several public locations that were presented by staff, and we narrowed it down and picked Leon Schmidt Heritage Park, which is a picture up here that I took. I hope you all can enjoy that picture. It was a nice, bright, sunny day that we went out and took a nice picture of the park. Basically, we picked this park because we thought that it's set up as it is, but it looks like it could be further enhanced with some sort of aesthetic design or something added to it. We've started to look at some artwork to get some ideas of the piece, considered based on what we like and what we thought would work for the location, keeping in mind the historical aspect of the park itself, okay? And of course, the historical society that sits on the property itself. The commission started investigating cost and budget based on conversations with various established professionals. Okay, so we said, hey, what would this cost? What would this budget bring us? And what we found out is that, you know, while there certainly are artwork pieces that we can purchase, some of the more customized or some of the more pieces that we would engage an artist and say, hey, we'd really like you to customize something, was way beyond what we could afford in our budget. But that didn't discourage us. We thought we wanted to continue looking and continue seeing what was available within the budget that we had, which was the budget that you guys had presented to us. One of the commissioners, Monica, saw an exhibit at the Morton Arboretum called Origami in the Park, and really was very enthused about it and talked to the rest of the commissioners and engaged us, and we all thought, this is really something. So what we did was we started to look at the artwork that particular artist, actually it's Kevin Box and his wife Jennifer, and they're from, was it Phoenix, Arizona? New Mexico, okay. And they actually have an exhibit, which I would encourage each one of you to go to see. It's actually through October 22nd at the Morton Arboretum, and they have various pieces all throughout the Arboretum that you could actually see and look at. What we're looking to do is we're looking to start out small with the budget that we have and eventually build on to that and make it more, you know, elaborate as time goes on. So in other words, this might be our first project that we kind of cut our teeth on and get used to and try and understand the process. And then we want to try and build on that in the few years to come, okay? So one of the things that we looked at was the idea of, if you can flip some of the pages, please. So again, this just kind of gives you an idea if you're not already familiar with what the park and the area looks like. So another slide, please. And again, giving you an idea of the different, you know, things that they've done with flowers and the beauty of the park itself. So one of the things we saw, or Monica saw at the Morton Arboretum that the boxes actually do, is an acorn. And we thought, wow, that's really cool. It fits right in with our theme of historical, and it's part of our symbolism. And we thought, it's very intricate. If you kind of look at this for a minute here, I don't know if I can take this up for a minute. So if you kind of look at how they put it together, they kind of did kind of an origami theme, which of course is what he was attempting to do. And just in the folding of it, the whole acorn itself is roughly 13 by 16 inches. So I guess it's about that big, okay? And it's actually made out of bronze. It's very attractive. And you can see the two different colors that involve it as well. And our idea here is that we would like to purchase, or we would like to investigate into purchasing several of these to kind of put together as a ornate, maybe on a plaque, maybe. We want to kind of figure out how we can mount those and how we can present them in the park, okay? And also in keeping on the idea that it can actually be built upon. So if you look at the next slide, please, this is an example of some of the other stuff that the boxes do. Here you actually have benches that we could put eventually with another project in an upcoming year. If you go on to the next one. This was one of my favorites. I just love the idea that they took the whole paper folding and kind of turned it into birds and put it on a statue here. I think that would work perfectly in the park. I really do. And I think all of it kind of keeping together in a theme, okay, as we've all talked about in the group, would really be a nice enhancement. and it would allow us to take it, they always say you don't eat an elephant all in one bite, right? You actually eat it in several small bites, okay? So that's what we as a team are trying to do. We're trying to eat this in small bites and learn, because we don't just want to present something to you because, oh, gee, we found it, we thought it was great, whatever else. We want to actually learn about it. We actually want to understand how it would fit in and how it would make this a really nice, aesthetically pleasing looking piece in the park. Okay? And like I said, I really do encourage you guys to go ahead and look at the Morton Arboretum and see the exhibit. It goes on through October 22nd. So what we're asking the council to do is consider what we've put together in the recommendation. We'd like them to see what we've done, the journey that we've taken, and we'd like to engage further discussion with the artist, present a cost proposal for the purchase and installation, and recommendation for the pieces in Leon Schmidt Park.
Thank you, Mike. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
Even considering I've heard it many times because I'm on the TAC Commission, and I can't tell you how many months and months and months we have discussed this as to what we were going to do. And when we saw these pieces, I think everybody on the committee was just so excited. And Monica brought forth a great idea, and this is something that will definitely enhance Leon Schmidt Park. But I'm sure that the other aldermen have some questions, comments. Alderman Goodman?
I'm so excited by what you've come up with here. I think that, the idea of the acorn sculptures at Leon Schmidt Heritage Park was sort of, a rather nebulous concept that we were thinking about at the beginning, and what you've come up with, I was at that exhibit at the Arboretum. It's lovely, and the idea that you've come up with this as an idea for some permanent installation here in Warrenville, I'm so impressed that you were able to put this idea together and make it happen. So I'm very supportive of this proposal, and thank you so much for all your work.
On behalf of the team, thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
Yes, so I just need to be clear on what you're asking tonight. Are you just asking for the acorns? Right?
No.
You're just talking about that?
So what we are asking is that we want to head in a direction with Leon Schmidt Heritage Park, and we want to present to you a cost proposal or a proposal of installation of the acorns. Yes, we are just looking at the acorns right now, but we want to keep the council in mind with what we're thinking, which is potentially in the years to come, adding to it and keeping a theme.
Okay, so you'll look at a lot of different things,
Absolutely.
not just modern art and stuff. You'll look at a lot of historical heritage, whatever you'll look at. There's probably lots to choose from, right?
Absolutely.
Terrific. Okay, so we're just looking at the acorns, which I think are fascinating and wonderful.
Yep.
So thank you.
Sure.
Alderman Widener?
I just want to express my appreciation for your work. We started without any sort of policy, with just some vague ideas on enhancing the city through artwork and aesthetics, and I really like the direction that you've taken it, even down to the piece that you've recommended. I mean, when you show somebody a piece of artwork that you're invested in, you can either get an eyebrow up or a frown down, because, we all know beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I think the piece that you selected blends well with kind of the natural areas that are surrounding us, and certainly we're trying to tie into that theme. So I really like that element that you're proposing. And I also like the idea that, you can buy a lot of mass-produced artwork, like the Precious Moments type stuff, that they sell 1 million of a certain ones. And I really like the idea of supporting the arts and looking at an individual artist who is going to create, something unique, and that's going to be one of a kind, and then only our town will have. Because I think as you establish those enhancements in and around town, it makes our community a little bit different, and people come to, see that, or, if your children grew up with that, they remember that unique piece of artwork and they bring their children back, or maybe, they just enjoy it so much they remain in town. and don't, move away so far. So I really like the direction you're going, and I wholeheartedly support the direction that you're headed. So thank you to all the members for your voluntary work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, just one further thought. Warrenville has such a wonderful history of artists. And the fact that our historical society has an artist's studio as one of the buildings there, right next to where you're proposing to install some artwork. I mean, it's so appropriate. It's a great location for the start of this program. I know our aesthetics program is going to look a little further afield and, hopefully eventually, create public spaces all throughout Warrenville that people will be proud of. But I'm just so excited that this is the way that we're starting, something that's really very Warrenville in many ways. So I really appreciate that. And I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council direct the Tourism and Arts Commission to engage in further discussions with the artist and present a cost proposal for the purchase and installation of the recommended art pieces for Leon Schmidt Park at a future Committee of the Whole meeting.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Very good. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Number 3, informational update on the Acorn Transportation Program. Another acorn. Okay, Christina White.
How fitting, almost like we did that on purpose,
Yeah.
right? Thank you. This evening in your agenda packets is a memo about the current Acorn program. The memo is split up into 3 separate sections, so we're going to go in order kind of how the memo is outlined. So the first section is just a brief overview of the fiscal year 17 program utilization. Second part of the memo is consideration of a pilot program with Ride DuPage, and the third portion is the lease renewal for the current van. So we're going to start with just an overview of the fiscal year 2017 program utilization, and I have lead van driver Larry Brenner is with us this evening to go over some of the exhibits that he put together for us. So with that, I will pass it along to Larry.
This has been a record year for Acorn. We've had 2 months now that we've had record numbers of ridership. We've peaked at 228 rides in a single month, which is certainly up from, we had under 100 during that 3 years ago during the vortex. We're running the Acorn van almost full, certainly Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're running. Not only are we running 100%, but we're having to reschedule people that don't have critical missions to the doctors, where they're maybe going to pick up something at Target, and we're telling them, well, can you go Friday or Monday? So we're running at 100%. I projected we're going to go up to about a 20% increase for next year, which would completely be saturation point. You can't get any more people on the van. I calculated 11 is a full day, 11 rides, and we're been running 16 some days. So it's just cramming them in, and but people have legitimate reasons for going. I mean, it's been a success. We've had talked about other programs, and if you talk to the riders, they're ready to revolt if they even mention something else beside Acorn. I've gone over to Winfield Township and I've talked to them. They have a mirror program of us. It's a different territory. It overlaps somewhat, goes all the way up to Town Line and north, but it goes up to certain areas. But they're doing the same thing we are. They're running the same pretty much full every day. And in order for us to coordinate, you would almost have to have one system where you had one person doing them both. But it could be done. But I've talked to people, and nobody wants to ride anything but Acorn. So we treat the thing is, we're treating everybody with a lot of dignity, and we care about everybody, and they all know us by name. Our costs have gone down because our ridership has gone up. So cost, and we've managed the the other two drivers, we're keeping the schedule. We're trying to compress it when possible, so we don't have somebody 8 hours a day. Maybe we only have them 6 or 7 doing the same amount of work. And we've been lucky with the gas, so hopefully we'll go forward. Any questions? Yes, Alderman Goodman.
Oh, Alderman Goodman?
So how many regular users do you have now?
Well, I'm going to break it down into, we have 20, I will call them daily users. And that's the ones that you can count on pretty much is going to ride any given day. Some ride every week, some ride every other week, but they're constant. You got 50 people that I'll call ride. You're going to, they're going to call. You don't necessarily know they're going to call every day, but you can count on them maybe to go if they have a doctor's appointment, especially when you to Edwards or CDH, they're going to call you maybe only once a month. And then you have another 25 beyond that, 75 total, that are signed on to the program that are there in case they need it but haven't used it yet. They've talked to people. They said, just in case I get sick, I need to know that I have a way to get around.
So about 1/3 of the registered users really don't use it.
Don't use it at all because you sign up doesn't mean that you buy a card or
Sure.
do anything. All it means is you're going through the paperwork so that if, God forbid, something happens, most of these people want to have a contingency plan in a medical emergency.
Okay, so it's about 20 daily users. I mean, I know in the past we had talked about this when it got down to as low as a dozen or something, so 20 is much more.
Yeah, well, we've actually had a big increase, and when you go from the 20 to the 50, a lot of that other 30 are riding, every couple weeks. So you've got people that are riding, steady, people that unfortunately have weekly and daily medical problems that we're taking them to a lot of doctor's appointments. But we're getting, a lot of business over at Target, and we certainly have a Tuesday at the luncheon over at Park District. We have our regular crew.
All right, thank you.
No
Going
other
once.
questions? Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, oh, Christine. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Next part of the memo talks about potentially looking at a pilot program with Ride DuPage. As Larry mentioned, the Acorn Van program is a great program. We have increased utilization over the last couple of years, but there's also been discussion in the past with the City Council about some of the limitations of the program and whether or not some of the other options that are out there might be a better option for the future. So a lot of the discussion that was had in 2014 and 15 looked at some of the other programs that are out there. PACE Bus offers some different community bus programs. Obviously, Ride DuPage is partnered with PACE to offer their program. Winfield Township, as Larry mentioned, also has a dial-a-service type program. And one of the hiccups that has come up in the past when we've looked at Ride DuPage as a possible alternative because of the extended service that they offer is sort of the unknown. Because the program is very catered to the community that it's in, they can create different scheduling and pricing points depending on what the community is looking for. Staff has kind of come up with this option to consider possibly doing a pilot program. Over a 12-month period, we would look at running both the Acorn Van and a Ride DuPage program concurrently. That would help to also kind of transition some of our current Acorn users, give them an opportunity to try out Ride DuPage, see what the service looks like, see what the customer service response or the problem resolution looks like, give us an opportunity to evaluate what the costs might be compared to what the current Acorn program is. Kind of acknowledging that as the program potentially grows, we may become more limited in what kind of service we can provide. Because we only have one van, we have so many drivers. As Larry mentioned, there's times when we have to turn people away. That doesn't happen very often at this point, but as the service continues to grow and expand, that may become an issue of not being able to provide service to people who need it. Some of the key differences that were identified by staff back in 2014 to the Ride DuPage program is that it does operate 24/7. It goes all throughout DuPage County. There's some cost differences, but again, the city could evaluate absorbing the additional costs that might go to the rider if that's something that we wanted to do. But at this point, what I'm really looking for from the council is direction to work with the township of Winfield, work with Winfield, the Village of Winfield and Village of West Chicago and PACE and Ride DuPage and see if we can come up with some sort of a partnership or combined program that makes sense for the riders in all of those communities to better utilize the service that's already out there through Ride DuPage and PACE. That would be something that we would discuss further in detail with the budget for fiscal year 19 coming up. And we would look at having the pilot program commence in May of 2018 through April of 2019. And that, of course, is all dependent on whether or not it makes sense and whether the research and the partnership conversations that we have with those other entities comes to fruition and makes sense for the riders of Warrenville. Any questions?
Alderman Davalos?
Yes, I'm definitely in favor of looking at an alternative, just to have that information. Because if we flip to the Community Development Committee, the whole, and you see what's going on and what's going to be coming as far as housing, and not all will be seniors, but some will be. And I think the demand for Acorn, something like Acorn, a service, is going to only increase over the years. So I think we have to take a look, because if we're close to our max, we've either got to get another van or make some other arrangements. So I'm definitely in favor of taking a look at what's out there and what might work for us.
Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, I know one of the concerns before was the Ride DuPage, that if they just had to run in and get some medicine, they'd have to call the guy back and he might not be there for an hour. And that was really, could be hard on some older people. So, I mean, I'd like to find out information on the other ride program, but I really like what's in place with the Acorn van at this point.
Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything Alderman Davalos said. I think the need for this is only going to increase. I think there are some advantages for 24/7 service, which we're not able to provide. I think it's very worth looking into. I think that this is a community that is important to our town, and we want to serve their needs, and we want to provide them with the best options, and not everybody is going to be able to, be served by one van with 11 rides a day or 16 when they're really pushing it. And I don't want to ignore all the existing options that are out there and overlapping services. And I think that the idea of going in on a group project with other communities is going to help us try and control costs, one hopes, and that's important too.
Let me just follow up a comment on the group. May I just follow up your question?
Go ahead, Larry.
May I? Is that when we get into sharing resources, which is an excellent idea so that you take away anybody that's underutilized, you have the potential to maximize their utilization. However, if we're going to combine, now you're going to need some kind of an agreement and a central dispatch point. Because in order to manage 2, 3, 4 transportation systems, there has to be someone saying, okay, based on your need and your destination and this utilization and this vacancy, I'm going to put you into this, into West Chicago today. So you have to have somebody to make those decisions. Great idea, just letting you know what is needed to make the system function properly.
I agree, but also the fact is if we're at our max and we would have to purchase another van, we would also have to have additional employees too. So that's another issue. So if we're going to combine, it's also additional employees. So either way, that's what's going to have to happen. Christina?
And I just want to add, at this point, we are not looking at expanding the current ACORN program, but as the demand increases, that may be something that we have to look at if we don't look at other options. So I think the benefit to having the discussions, and I've had a very preliminary discussion with a representative from Winfield Township, who, as I said, they have their own individual Dial-A-Ride program. They're also looking at, you know, is this really the best program for our residents and our riders that need it, or do we share or go through a different, more established program that has more service capability? So I think the benefit to this option is that it gives us an opportunity to really dive in and evaluate and work with all of these different groups, work with Ride DuPage, work with PACE, come up with something that makes the most sense for us. And it's kind of a low impact risk for us because we're not eliminating our current program, we're not forcing anybody out of the current program. It gives us a chance to run them side by side, really evaluate what it has to offer, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we continue with our program and look at what expansion looks like at some point in the future.
Alderman Widener?
Yeah, thanks. Is there going to be any kind of cost besides the staff involvement with running these pilot program or establishing a pilot program and operating the existing one?
Yes, so that would have to be discussed with Ride DuPage as far as what those costs would be. We would effectively create a 12-month program, decide what we want the riders to pay, what the city is willing to do, and that would all be discussed as part of our budget for the fiscal year 19. So you'd have an opportunity at that point to look at what is that cost going to look like for that 12-month pilot program. It doesn't require us to commit to anything beyond that 12 months. We can cancel the program if we decide that it doesn't work, but there would be a cost to running the program.
So we
in
would be
addition to
paying for
ACORN.
that pilot program, and then we would be paying for the existing ACORN program.
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like to ask Mr. Brenner, who, I'd also like to compliment Mr. Brenner because I think when we looked at this program last time, the ride share cost was $3 higher than what it is today. So hats off to you for bringing the cost down. I think you've managed. Had a lot to do with managing the program along with staff, and we appreciate that. And I just wanted to ask you, with your expertise, how you would expand, suppose, the new developments do create an increase in ridership. How would, what recommendations would you have under the current program to expand it to accommodate the new users?
Well, I certainly wouldn't add another van yet because of the fluctuality of the ridership. You have riders that are elderly and disabled, and on any given day, I could have 14 scheduled rides and 6 cancellations because we had a snow squall, and you don't know. And there's days the weather gets cold and people don't want to go out, and the next day, for whatever reason, everybody has a doctor's appointment. So right now we're managing, still managing fluctuations. I think that going forward, we certainly could increase the hours, maybe an hour each way. That would certainly give you another 20% more ability without having to go into another vehicle. Your cost then would become the drivers, I mean. We do have to be cognizant of the fact that we can't have them over 1,000 hours a year because of the retirement system. So, but you may end up. I mean, I don't even think that there's. I would almost say that when we get busier, I would recommend getting another driver because they're working part-time. There's no real cost other than training somebody. They're not getting benefits. So if you have another driver and everybody's working, say, right now I have one working 2, one working 3, and I'm covering whenever. If you had, we have one driver, he's been there a long time. I don't know how much longer he's going to go, but he's here now and he's doing a great job. Another driver, she's could do anything at any time. She's had times when she's been off, but Otherwise, she's been a great driver. So I would say if we got another person, then everybody would still work, 1 or 2 days a week then. And maybe longer hours for now.
Can I ask a follow-up? Have you had much turnover in the drivers?
None.
None? Have you thought of any other efficiencies that would either bring the cost down or that would improve the service levels in our community?
Well, I think that what I've done and I've continued to do, and we continue to shrink the schedule when possible. So if we have somebody wants to go at 8:30 and the next trip is until 10, and the person is just going to maybe pick up some things over at the drugstore, I say, well, can you make it 9? So now I don't have the driver coming in a little bit later. We certainly are, I keep doing our own. Vern does the maintenance. I make sure the van is clean. And I think that, there's days, let's say, for example, we have a gap of a couple hours on a Monday. Well, I'll offer the driver, I says, why don't you go home, and I'll cover the last trip. That way we're not keeping anybody on the clock for 2 hours. I do that, that's the kind. I mean, you only have one van and 2 drivers plus myself, so you don't have a lot of room. We do make sure that, we're running an efficient route. We're doubling up whenever possible. Whenever we can pick somebody up en route, we're doing it. We're, sometimes a matter of changing somebody's schedule 10 minutes because we're going to that same subdivision and going in that same general direction. So I say, hey, we're going to pick you up 10 minutes earlier because we have another rider, and everybody's going to go the same way.
So it sounds like there's flexibility, but also a lot of efficiency that is brought into the city managing its own programs.
We certainly have the ability to, if we had a population growth spurt of people that needed the van service, I mean, we have the ability to lease another van and grow the program. But I look at it this way: we're not running a profit. We're running a cost center because we're providing service. So at some point, and with the uncertainty of any given day, do you really want to be having the cost of 2 vans? I would say not at the moment. Not at the moment. Not unless you had significant growth.
What is the capacity of the van that we operate? Is it a 12-person van?
No. That was the old days. That was the old van. We have that was the 12-person van in the 10-mile radius. Now we have I'll call it a 5-person van. But of course, if somebody's in a wheelchair, that changes it to a 2-person van, because the wheelchair will take the whole back area, and then you just have 1 seat. But it's almost impossible that you're gonna. I've had very rarely, and it's very rare that you have 3 passengers in the van at any given time because of where everybody's going. But if we can, we will try to get 3 in there.
What would be the advantages that you would see of running a side-by-side program, a pilot program, and running the existing program?
Well, obviously, what you said was flexibility. The other one is utilization. I mean, if you're overutilized in one resource, you have to grow another resource. If you're not willing to home grow it, you have to farm it out and go into something like a Ride DuPage. It would give you flexibility if you've got ridership that are willing to be flexible. You have people that say you can't get them off the Acorn. I mean, because the way we treat them. I mean, we treat them lovingly, and we really care about every single passenger. They're not just, it's just not a job. Everybody we know, everybody we care about, and there's people that have unique illnesses and unique handicaps that we're very weary of, and that we very take care of everybody. So.
Well, thank you for your delivery of service, and thanks for answering my questions.
Anybody else?
Alderman Wilson?
Yeah, well, this is close to I drove that van for about 3 years, back before, at the very beginning. I was the 3rd driver, if I believe, for the van back when we had the big one. So I know the ins and outs of the operation of it, and I I think it's appropriate that every once in a while you take a look at any program we have to see if it can be worked better, more efficiently, and still give the service that the people expect that live here in Warrenville. So it's a little close to my heart when we talk about this. And I can see some problems in trying to work. We have our own limitations. Is it still 5 miles?
5 mile radius.
5 mile radius, so that first. And we have, DuPage is the whole county of DuPage. So the cost is different too. We have our fixed cost. You know, to ride DuPage, you had to pay money to get on, and plus, it used to be $1 a mile. $2 to get on plus $1 a mile so you could go as far as you wish on that, but that's the cost to the rider. So if you went out 5 miles, it's costing you $7. And then if you want to come back home again, it's another $7. But that's available and it's an option if you want to go beyond the limitations of the Acorn van. But trying to work that out, and I think that's fine if you want to take a crack at it. I don't know precisely how you're going to work that out, but I'm willing to certainly have you take a look at it and see if there is some way that we can combine it, where we keep the Acorn van, because it does require some personal care with the individuals, and they like that aspect of it. And I'm not sure you're going to get it with the pace. And the other thing that was mentioned, you have to schedule that there, and they will drop you off, and then they'll pick you up. So you have to schedule that pickup at their convenience, not with, more so than anyway. But anyway, I would be delighted to see any results that you can put together where our program would be more efficient, better serving our people, and still at a cost effective. So I'm looking forward to the program that you can present back to us. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Assistant City Administrator, Christina.
Okay, the last part of the memo is the renewal of our van lease. So the current van expires in January of 2018. Staff looked at a few different options with the leasing company. We can either continue and extend the current lease, we can start a new lease with a new van, or we could purchase the current van. Given the discussion that occurred with the pilot program, staff's recommendation at this point is to extend the current lease through April of 2019. So that would tie in nicely with if we did a pilot program for 12 months, starting on the fiscal year, it would tie in closely with the van. So at this point, I'm looking for the city council to allow me to go back to the leasing company and get final pricing on what the extension of the lease would be, and then come back to the next committee meeting in September with that information.
Questions about that? Okay. Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the city council direct staff to, 1, negotiate a lease agreement with Midwest Transit for the current Acorn van for further consideration at the September 25th Finance and Public Safety Committee of the Whole meeting, and 2, to work with Ride DuPage and Pace on a pilot program for the city of Warrenville with a potential partnership with the Village of Winfield, the City of West Chicago, and Winfield Township for consideration to be part of the fiscal year 2019 budget.
Second.
A motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. It's a great update on the Acorn program, and I like that we keep bringing it back and keep getting updates on it, and also that we get some other ideas about how to help the citizens of Warrenville get around that aren't able to it any longer. So, thank you. Number 4, consideration of a request to dispose of surplus city property using E-Scrap Technologies Incorporated. Assistant City Administrator Christina White.
Thank you. The city has currently a stockpile of some electronic equipment that we need to dispose of. So included in the packet backup is a list of those items. They range from old electrical cords, MDTs from the police department, computer pieces, old phones that no longer have a purpose, that they're beyond their useful life. Most of it probably doesn't even work. And at this point just needs to be recycled and disposed of. So we are requesting the use of e-scrap that will come by and pick up those items and recycle them at no cost to the city. Because there is no value, there's no purpose in trying to auction it off or selling it. No one's going to buy that. So because it's electronics, we need to recycle them in a environmentally friendly way, and this company will do that, and they've offered to pick it up and take care of it, so we don't even have to worry about getting it to them or getting it to an electronic recycling center. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Alderman Goodman?
I'm pleased that we're able to recycle this at no charge. I know a lot of these items often actually cost money to haul away and recycle. But one thing about this list that strikes me is how many different brands and models the city has of the same thing. Cell phones, computers, laptops, routers, printers. There isn't much consistency, which indicates some good things, gradual small purchases when the city grows or has to replace something that's broken. But maybe also some not great consequences, like higher IT costs if we have a lot of incompatible things that don't really work together, or that one particular IT person or company might not exactly know how to maintain. So I see some of these things are quite old. I guess we've been accumulating this pile for quite a long time. I saw 5 different floppy drives, for example. My goodness. Yeah. So that may also contribute to this cacophony, but any thoughts on that going forward? Does this list sort of seem representative of our IT holdings as a whole?
I would say no. This list, as you mentioned, there's a lot of items on here that are really old, and we have tried historically to be cost effective with our replacement of different technology. So we do have some older computers that we will wait to transition out until they are getting close to that end of life, or sometimes a little bit beyond end of life. So our current setup is much more efficient and consistent. This list is more of again, stockpiling of several years of items that sometimes we keep for parts because there's still some use in having some old computers around in case we need to swap something out that can be swapped out. The phones, some of our staff have smartphones, the hourly employees are still on flip phones, so those are different models or brands. But generally speaking, I think our current setup is pretty consistent.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Alderman Hoffman?
I was just wondering, seeing as they're going to pick this stuff up for free, they're obviously making money at that, why we couldn't include the residents in town, make a drop-off spot if they have electronics they need to dispose of. They could drop it off someplace here in town and the people could pick that up also. Is that something you could look into possibly?
I can ask the question that we would have to talk to the company about. That's a little bit different because we're talking about accepting recycling. Unfortunately, what sometimes happens when we open it up to citywide or allowing residents to drop off is they tend to drop off items that are not acceptable under the electronics recycling program, or that might end up costing us money. An example of that is like old computer monitors that are not the thin flat screens, but the big tube monitors. Those, if they were to take them, we would have to be charged for those. I can certainly ask the question and have that information for the next meeting, but that would require a little bit more thought as to what we would accept and how we would communicate that out in a timely fashion.
Because even if they had stuff that they had to pay a little bit for, there'd probably be people willing to pay it just to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. And I believe this company does offer a drop-off center, but that's something we can find out.
Thank you.
Administrator Coakley?
I was just going to mention I believe it was around the 4th of July, or it was a month and a half ago, the VFW did have about a 5-day or a week-long program where they were accepting recycling of electronics right over at the VFW building in Warrenville. They just had people could bring the things, put them under the shelter, and they had a company that came and sorted it out. If this is something that we want to look at doing, I would want to make absolute sure that it isn't going to involve a lot of staff time. We have some other recycling programs that require a lot of sorting and hands-on things. It always sounds good to have this free recycling program, but then you get a couple hours of staff time every month involved in something, and it becomes quite a long-established program and starts to take up hours and time. So it's a great thing because there's lots of electronics, and we're disposing of them every day. I'm very familiar with that, and they've got to go someplace. They can't go in the landfills, and if we can provide that service, it's certainly a good thing. But we want to make sure that the company that is doing that has a site. We could let them police it. We don't have to manage it. We don't have to allow people in the secured areas of like the public works yard or something, or have a pile of things. Sometimes they tend to also, you see, we might have, for example, a container in front of public works, and suddenly you get a dumping site where there's all kinds of things beyond old TV sets. You end up with furniture and junk because human nature is a very strange thing, and I see piles of things and start to pile it up. So we want to just be careful, is my point, and make sure it would be something the company would handle, and it wouldn't involve more staff. We never want to increase the city's costs if we don't have to. Thank you.
Alderman Widener?
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. There's a great resource center called SCARCE that has a website. It stands for School Community Area Recycling Center. I believe the county supports it with funding each year, along with it being a nonprofit and gathering funding of its own. They print an excellent calendar of recycling events, and there's usually an electronic recycling event every month or every 3 weeks. It's, you know, close to our community. I've taken advantage of the SCARCE website myself on a number of occasions, and I really find it valuable. Secondly, a lot of those recycling, electronic recycling days offer the opportunity to erase the personal information that people might bring that's contained in their computer, and that might be very important to them. I'm not sure if we hosted one ourselves whether we'd be able to have that advantage. So I think there's a lot of opportunities around to do electronic recycling if people do go to the SCARCE website. Secondly, I was relieved to see on the inventory that there weren't any IBM Selectric typewriters.
That's on
John
another
must
list.
have gotten rid of his last year or something.
The manual.
Yeah. And thirdly, I just, this has pretty much become a routine with the city's police department to remove and get rid of extra surplus equipment in this way. So with that, I make a motion to recommend the city council authorize staff to dispose of the surplus property as listed, utilizing eScrap Technologies Incorporated.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Widener and a second by Alderman Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 5, consideration of IDOT letter to concur with award of Route 56 streetscape project to the low bidder. That would be presented by Christine Hocking, our senior civil engineer.
Thank you. On Friday, August 4th. Hello? Hi. Okay. On Friday, August 4th, finally, bids were opened for the Route 56 Streetscape Enhancement Project. There were 6 bids. The low bidder was Thorn Electric with an amount of $1,105,677.80. This was actually approximately $65,000 over the initial cost estimate provided by our consultant. When something like this happens, IDOT requires the city to concur on the low bid because it is above the original cost that the city had originally approved. We took a look at some of the items that were in the bid that IDOT provided to us. Some of them
For the most part, everything lined up. There were a couple of items, because it's an electric company that won the bid, the electric items in generally were lower than the engineer's cost estimate, whereas the more streetscape type of items like the big stone monument, the entrance signs, wayfinding signs, those were higher than our engineer's estimate. One particular item, the wayfinding signs, was in the range of $72,000, whereas they had the engineer had estimated approximately, I believe it was like 25,000. So when we went through everything, we found that that was one item that we could potentially pull out if we went forward with this contract with Thorn Electric. It is not a major item under IDOT. If it is a major item, it consists of 10% of the original cost estimate, and those type of items are not able to be removed at any point in the project. So that would be items for this project. For the most part, it's all the lighting. I mean, that's considered one of the major items as part of this project. So we believe that we could reduce or eliminate this if we went forward and produced this letter for IDOT to concur with the low bid. If there's any other savings identified during the construction project, that would result in keeping the city's share under the budgeted amount, then obviously these signs wouldn't be eliminated at that time. If they are eliminated, we would project in FY19 to do it as a separate type of project to install these wayfinding signs. Obviously, we'd have to go through and get an IDOT permit, but they've already blessed the signs through this project. One other item to note in the summary: the committee's action requested is actually to direct staff to prepare a letter. Because of the timing of this award, we want to make sure that IDOT contracts with Thorn Electric as soon as possible, and so to keep the project moving forward and potentially keeping everything on schedule to install some of these items, within this fall, winter time, we're requesting the committee just to direct staff rather than the city council.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Alderman Widener?
Yeah, we have this other project going on with this other marketing group. As we design and develop the signage, will it be kind of tied into that existing project and that group's recommendations? It's, I think, Ms. Domavasova is leading the program on it, and I have no problem with the project itself. I just think that there's an opportunity here maybe to tie into the theme or the palette of colors that they select or whatever with our signage and wayfinding things, so that we are kind of on the same page with what's going on at the with this other study.
That could definitely be a possibility if we pull it off of this project, obviously after the contract's awarded, that we could work with Natalia and the group to, make it more cohesive with what they're, that would potentially mean that we would just wait for the wayfinding signs to be installed at a later date, obviously. But if city council is okay with that, then that would be the direction that we would go.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Goodman?
Obviously, I think that, if we're able to save $45,000, then that's a direction we should go in. Having to pay $72,000 for something that's only worth $25,000 to us doesn't sound very appealing. But I think I do want to emphasize that removing the wayfinding signs entirely is a bad idea, and that would not at all reflect the recommendations of the Route 56 Streetscape Work Group. The idea was to use this new construction to simultaneously improve the city's appearance and also to help citizens make their way around the new areas and better utilize our public spaces and be directed to important things in the community. So I do want to see the wayfinding signs go up. I'd like to see it happen soon. If it can be coordinated with the branding group, then that's great. I know the timing for that is delayed from what we had hoped when we were doing these wayfinding signs, because the idea that we'd put together as part of the streetscape work group involved acorns, and now we're not going that way anymore. So there have been some changes, and I guess I could see some advantage to delaying it, but I want to emphasize that I think it's important that this project still go forward with wayfinding signs in place. And I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to prepare a letter to concur to IDOT to award the project to the low bidder, Thorn Electric, in the amount of $1,105,677.80, and authorize Mayor Brummel to sign the letter.
Second.
It's a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Number 6, consideration of a request to dispose of surplus city property using Obanoff Auction Services, and this is being presented by Justin Miller, our Public Works Management Analyst, and welcome to Justin.
Thank you.
I think
and
this
welcome.
is your first time here.
Yep, it is. And just to introduce myself, Justin Miller, your new management analyst at Public Works. The department has identified roughly about a dozen items that need to be disposed of that have also has not been identified to be usable in other departments. So we're asking for that to be disposed of, those items to be disposed of, anything from an F-350 to a to snow throwers. We would use past precedents. The police department has used Obernoff Auction Services in the past. They've had a great success, and they've enjoyed working with them. From talking with them, they do charge a 6% fee to list those. The nice thing is that everything's still housed in the city. I believe it's done in an online format, and again, that's kind of the advantage. We can still have people come in and view those items before they're sold. So that's all that I have. I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions? Alderman Goodman?
Just one question. Usually we've used Obanoff in the past for vehicles and propertyroom.com for all the sort of miscellaneous stuff. So why is there some miscellaneous stuff in addition to the vehicle on this one? Because obviously a 6% fee, which Obanoff charges, is a lot better than the 50% fee that propertyroom.com charges. So it's better to do it this way, but just wondering why.
I had Justin tasked with going through and working with the supervisors to determine what items were Public Works garage we could dispose of. Some of them, if Obanoff won't auction them off, we will find a different way to dispose of. If they can't auction it off, then we'll scrap it. We've got a scrap metal pile. But most of these items, I think, are able to be auctioned by Obanoff.
Okay, so they don't just sell vehicles, and they have some other list of items that they accept?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Widener?
I move to recommend the city council authorize staff to dispose of the surplus property as listed, utilizing Obanoff Auction Services.
Second.
A motion by Alderman Widener and a second by Alderman Davalos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Great. Number 7, consideration of scope of work for Ray Street resurfacing. It's being presented by Phil Kukler, our Deputy Public Works Director.
Thank you. Ray Street between Rockwell Street and Curtis Avenue is due for resurfacing in 2018. While TIF 2 was active, it was city policy to install curb and gutter and sidewalk on one side of the street when resurfacing the roads in TIF 2. TIF 2 ended before Ray Street came up for resurfacing. So right now, staff is proposing to add curb and gutter and sidewalk to one side of the street when Ray Street's resurfaced during the 2018 road program next year. Since Ray Street falls within TIF 3, staff is proposing to utilize TIF 3 funds to pay for the work. We're seeking direction from the committee to incorporate this work into the road program as we begin preparation of the bid documents for a bid opening that we anticipate being in March for next year's road program. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, is that curb going to be like that low roll curb like they did on 4th Street? And it'd be nice to have a survey on the people from the Ray Street, what they feel about a sidewalk, before we could get it rolling, but it'd be nice to know what the people really want there.
The curb will be consistent. I can't remember if we've got a roll curb or if it's like a reduced height, like a barrier, a B412 curb on Manning and Curtis. When those projects were constructed, Mike Smith had the consultant design Ray Street, at least give a preliminary design, so they would design the intersections properly to meet with future Ray Street construction. As far as sidewalks, I would anticipate at a minimum we'd be having a meeting this fall with the residents on Ray Street to determine which side of the street's the better side for sidewalk and what their preference is.
Okay, because the lower curb kind of made it easier when people didn't want curbs at all, and it satisfied them, so.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Alderman Hoffman.
Yeah, I'm definitely for you getting a survey of the people there, because I've heard a lot of negative comments about curbs, or they don't want the curbs. So if I can't see spending money to make people miserable, because it's going to create a parking problem down. I can see that already. So I think you should go door to door, make sure everybody knows that that's coming up, and see what their input is on it. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Question, Alderman Davalos?
Yeah, just for a point of clarification, do we ask residents about curb and gutter? I mean, is that what we've done in the past? Because I see this area, Ray, and Manning and Warren is what's left, which is great, actually, that whole middle of town has sidewalks and curb and gutter. Anyway, or curb and gutter. Do we ask them, or is it kind of all uniform?
I believe, and I asked Administrator Coakley for some input, but I believe when the TIF 2 streets were being done, that there's just city policy to install curb and gutter on both sides of the street and sidewalk on at least one side of the street. I'm not sure that the residents were surveyed or had much of a say in it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Administrator Coakley?
No, you're correct. It was a discussion of the city council. There were public meetings. At least it was done in public meetings. I don't even recall if there was, I think there was meetings before each of the, let me rephrase that. There were definitely meetings before each of the projects where the sidewalk was added. I remember a lot of input when we did Main Street, and that was more memorable at the time. There was a resident who came and was very upset about the sidewalk going in their front yard. I remember clearly sitting in this room and thought it would be just a terrible thing, and afterwards came back to the council, which is really, really rare to have somebody who comes and complains, and later came back and said it was a wonderful amenity, they were wrong. It really, really great. So I know that we had public input in it, is my point of that story. Some of the areas already had some sidewalk in the old part of town in TIF 2, but they were widened to meet the current standards. One of the questions that came to mind to one of the questions up here, would Ray Street be widened? I don't know what the width of the pavement, if it meets the current standard, put you on the spot here. If there was curb and gutter added to that, would it be possible that there'd still be parking allowed, or only on one side? Most of the streets in the old part of town here, in the old TIF 2, were wide enough to accommodate cars on both sides. You drive on Warren Avenue, Manning, most of the streets, you see parking on both sides.
We could definitely consider widening it. I don't recall what the exact width is right now. It's fairly narrow, like a lot of the rural cross-section streets are, but in adding curb and gutter, we could certainly consider widening it to allow parking on one side.
Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to add curb and gutter to Ray Street with sidewalk on one side of the street during the 2018 road program, utilizing TIF number 3 funds.
We have a motion by Alderman Goodman and a second by Alderman Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Flavor, okay. In favor? Okay, I guess so. Opposed? Okay, motion passes with flavor. Okay, on to number 8. Council discussion of installation of new sidewalks during the annual road program or other construction projects. Also, Phil Kukler, Deputy Public Works Director.
Thank you again. You may recall at the June 12th Public Works Committee and Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, the whole meeting, that Alderman Widener raised the question as to whether or not we could include additional money in the annual road program to construct sidewalks. Staff committed at that time to bringing this issue back to this meeting tonight for discussion or further discussion of the issue. Currently, there's no funding for new sidewalks in the city budget anywhere. The road program is funded by the Capital Maintenance and Replacement Fund, and that's used to fund the maintenance and replacement of existing infrastructure such as sidewalks. It doesn't fund any new construction of any items. The new sidewalk construction would be challenging. It's often, when we've installed sidewalk on rural cross-section streets, there's often grading, tree removal, some installation of curb and gutter, storm sewer to go along with the sidewalk to make the drainage work and to make it fit. And also with people on rural cross-section streets, while the parkway is not their yard, they tend to treat the parkway as their yard all the way up to the roadway, so you might have some additional landscape features and other things out there that aren't normally there in a neighborhood with curb and gutter and sidewalk already. Because of those extra challenges, we typically need an engineering consultant to help us design. They perform a survey of the neighborhood and perform a design then of the sidewalk and additional improvements to make the sidewalk work on a particular side of the street. Tonight, with the discussion that you're all about to have, some items that staff would find useful to hear your input on. I mean, should you choose to go forward with a sidewalk program of some sort, is how would such a program be funded? Would the residents be required to fund any portion of the sidewalk improvements on their streets? What level of funding would you envision being included in an annual budget? I'm thinking more of order of magnitude, $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year. As Alderman Bevere's brought up, would the residents have any say in if a sidewalk goes in their neighborhood or not? Would they be consulted or have the ability to vote on it ahead of time? If, there's some neighborhoods where people probably would be in favor, the majority of people would be in favor. There might be neighborhoods where the majority of people would not be in favor of it. And then finally, would all streets receive sidewalks, or would the program target the high priority sidewalks or even medium priority sidewalks who are identified in the city's adopted sidewalk priority plan? And ultimately, if council wishes to create a program, I did include a recommended motion in the agenda summary that you could use tonight if there's consensus among you to move forward with some sort of program. But right now, I would, I guess, be open to listening to your discussion and answering questions from me if you have them.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. I have an obvious question for everybody but me probably, and then another question. The obvious question is that I don't know the answer to is, if you don't have storm sewer, can you have sidewalks?
You can. The challenge in some cases where you would need to add storm sewer would be if there's the ditches in those rural street cross sections
Right.
handle the drainage. And so depending on how steep they are and that type of stuff, you may need to fill the ditches in some cases and convey the water with pipes. And that might be longer culverts or storm sewers. But it's possible if everything, in an ideal world, yes, you could put a sidewalk in without storm sewer, but we found, particularly look at the east side and the longitudinal slopes on the streets there and the hills there and that type of stuff, it gets really difficult to put a sidewalk in without some sort of storm sewer filling the ditches and curb and gutter in some cases.
There's storm sewers on the east side of Ward 3?
There are some, yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. Well, yeah, it's an expensive proposition, but ever since I've moved here, which is over 30 years ago, and many of you have lived a lot longer, this always comes up. This comes up in any survey you do with citizens and any sort of thing. Where are the sidewalks? And so I always am in favor of looking at it. And I mean, as far as funding it, we have this excess amount in the general fund. We have TIF money coming. It'll take a group of people, led by Kevin, I guess, to figure out the best place to pull money. And maybe you do it very slowly. I don't know, but I still get questions about sidewalks, and so I would like to be able to say. In fact, I got one yesterday about the water line going into the Forest Preserve District, why there can't be sidewalks. And of course, some of the property isn't even owned by the city, but it just comes up. So I think we should sort of look at it and begin to make a plan of how we could fund it. Even if it's just a little bit at a time, I would like to be able to say sometimes the city is working on it. There is a plan. Your street may not come up right away. We're not going to do the whole city at once, most probably, but we are talking about it in council. The staff is working on it, and we understand that people like to walk and they enjoy sidewalks. So I'm in favor of looking at it, knowing it's daunting. But I somehow think, my guess is that we can find the funding to just begin and start and work with the road program. So I'm in favor of this. And I understand you need answers to this, but I'm willing to jump in and roll up my sleeves and figure out. Probably a lot of other people are. Anyway, thanks.
Alderman Hoffman?
Yeah, I think if we're going to be pushing for sidewalks through the whole town, we should probably think about implementing a snow removal project, so people don't have to walk maybe more than a block or two before they can get to a sidewalk that's been shoveled. In the winter, that's when you really need the sidewalks, because you can't walk on the side of the street, and they're so covered with snow and ice that it makes it pretty much impassable. You're forced to the street. And you don't want to be walking on the street when it's slippery, because next thing you know, you got a car sliding into you. So I don't see any problem with sidewalks, but we also need to maintain them. Thank you.
Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, I'm in favor of looking into it, but, you know, we're looking at Ray Street as a sidewalk. Williams didn't get one, Calumet didn't get one. Last year, Williams got one and Iroquois Court didn't, so, you know, it's all over the place. So I think we need to look at it, but I don't know if we need to really say we're gonna do sidewalks for everything. It's where it's really needed. If it's gonna link a path, like on Williams, it linked getting over the bridge. It was a nice path, made a lot of sense. So there's some areas that don't make any sense. And I'm in favor of looking into it.
Alderman Goodman?
I think going along with some of what's been said, to answer the questions asked by staff, I agree that we certainly, if we're setting up this program, need to prioritize which sidewalks. And we do have a sidewalk plan from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, which has some priorities about trail linkages in particular, and I think that's a really good starting place. I don't think that necessarily a policy to put a sidewalk on every street is something that we would all agree with. I think I'm speaking for the council when I say that we would be interested a lot more in putting sidewalks in places that are higher priorities and not in setting a policy that all streets receive sidewalks during the road program. Secondly, I think to answer some of the staff's questions, how would the program be funded? I think given the impact on the CMRP to building more sidewalks, that doing, a project at a time is the way to do it. But having a budget of only 50,000 or some of these numbers here doesn't seem quite high enough to me. I remember a sidewalk we recently put in to connect Summer Lakes to the new park, and that was almost $100,000. So I think maybe $100,000 is about an appropriate number if you're asking us to give you an order of magnitude ballpark figure. That sounds like that could do about a project a year. Along with what Alderman Davalos was talking about, new sidewalks is something that I get asked about all the time, and this may be because I live in Maple Hill, possibly the only part of the community which is not connected to Warrenville, any other part of Warrenville, with any sort of sidewalk or street connection. So I suppose my question for you, which is not part of your questions, is should we, as part of this sidewalk plan, consider sidewalks other than in conjunction with our road program? Is that going to be a possibility? Because we certainly don't own every road in town that we might be interested in putting a high priority sidewalk on. When I look at the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission's map of the high priority sidewalks, they tend to be along Route 59, for example, or yes, the possible Forest Preserve connection up to Maple Hill. I know one recent sidewalk that we had talked about was along Route 59 from Country Ridge up to River Oaks. And I believe that didn't get funded when we applied for a grant for it. But, if we're not just applying for grants and hoping that these will eventually be funded by somebody else, then I think we do need to start thinking about funding a couple of the higher priority sidewalks ourselves. And so maybe $100,000 a year is a good place to start. Resident input is very important to that, and I think was certainly part of the prioritization when the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission put together their sidewalk plan. So taking a poll of everybody who lives on a street as to whether they want a sidewalk in front of their house, I don't think that's honestly the most important consideration, because plenty of people might want to walk by an area who don't live in that house that the sidewalk is built in front of. So it isn't something we've done in the past. I don't think it's a requirement that we should have going forward, but what our community wants for our sidewalks is certainly something I think is very important to consider. And to answer your question about whether the residents would be required to fund any of the sidewalk improvements, I think it's very hard to imagine I'd be in favor of that. You know, whether Maple Hill might want to chuck in a little bit to connect to the rest of the city, I suppose you could ask them. I don't think they'd be too excited about it, but you know, that's the kind of thing that might be plausible. I don't know. However, I think that asking a resident to pay for the sidewalk right in front of their particular one house sounds like a pretty bad idea. So I think that's addressed a lot of your questions, and those are just my 2 cents, and I don't generally speak for the council.
Alderman Widener.
Yeah, I brought this up because I think that, you know, on some occasions there'd be a certain amount of efficiency and utility when you looked at it combined with your roads program. There'd be some cost savings, and certainly there'd be other priorities that would work outside the annual roads program. So I agree with the way you worded the motion to develop a program. I don't know that we need to identify the funding source this evening. Funding can come in, you know, as we've seen from the agenda item before, through a TIF. We've received grants in the past, and then there's other ways to fund. A lot of communities look at the sidewalks as part of their transportation program. And there's ways, you know, a lot of ways to support transportation networks. The sidewalk priority plan was established in 2007. We may need to go back and, you know, look at that and revise it. Maybe some of the projects have been completed, like the sidewalk along Galusha Road when we developed the middle school, that's in, and so forth. But, you know, this was first brought to me when we were doing Williams Road. You know, we have a lot of cut-through streets in town. We often hear from our residents, you know, who are worried about their kids, you know, playing in the street. And, you know, if we had sidewalks on some of those cut-through streets, potentially we might make our community safer. And of course, you know, we kind of set store and stock in making our community, first of all, very safe. And then we also, of course, want to make it fiscally responsible. But, you know, Warrenville is starting to attract and become very well known because of its pathways and connections in the community and to the outside of our community. And I think we should go forward recognizing that people really cherish that about Warrenville when they talk about it. They talk about the trails, they talk about the connections that we have to places like the Prairie Path, the forest preserves, and things like that. So if we just add a little more concentration and review it once a year to see if, you know, there's priorities that we can take care of, I think it would enhance, you know, our town quite a bit. The Urban Land Institute mentions that home buyers are willing to pay more for homes with walkable neighborhoods. Real Estate Research Corporation shows that property values rise fastest in pedestrian-friendly areas. So there's a lot of good reasons to really look at this at least once a year. And with that, I'm willing to make the motion to, let's see, where's direct staff to include preparation of sidewalk program into the fiscal year 2019 Public Works Department work plan.
Second.
A motion by Alderman Widener and a second by Alderman Goodman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Review and file Public Works Department work plan status report. This is an information only, but are there any questions? As long as Mr. Kukler is here. Alderman Widener?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention regarding the solar project that that was referred to the Environmental Awareness Advisory Group, or Environmental Advisory Group, and they are undertaking discussion, a study, and will finalize a report in the near future regarding that. So rather than there being no progress, I just thought I'd report that there has been some progress in that area. Thank you.
Okay. And then number 10, the review and file Public Works Department decision packages status report. Also, if there are any questions. Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to number 10, number 11, review and file Public Works Service Levels and Staffing Study Recommendation Status Report. Questions? Alderman Goodman?
I just had sort of an overall question about that. There are at least 4 or 5 items here which are high priority that haven't been started. One of them that says high priority is number 21, to adopt a policy requiring operators to perform and log pre- and post-trip inspections of equipment. It says review and modified draft. I'm not quite sure what that means. Is that some policy that's going to be reviewed by the council? What draft?
Robin Weaver, the consultant that was helping us out last year, that helped me evaluate this stuff, had put together a draft of a policy, and I was waiting until Justin started to be able to work through that with staff to make sure that it's realistic, first of all, to make sure that the gentlemen who actually drive these vehicles and know what they need to do for their CDL and that type of stuff have a say in that as well. So Justin's going to work on that with supervisors, and then I don't know that it's something that necessarily has to come to council. It's more just a staff policy and what the driver or our workers should be doing before and after driving vehicles.
Okay, that's good to know. And a lot of these high priority items that say not started, we're probably waiting for us to have a management analyst in place. But would you say that since a lot of this is on the work plan, would you say that most of those items that say not started are hopefully going to be started sometime soon?
Yes, and some of those high priority items too depend on a little bit on the ERP being in place and having the ability to actually have a work order management system in place to be able to do that. I mean, right now we're working off of getting summaries of work that starting with utility division and what they do on a month-to-month basis or a day-to-day basis by month. And Justin's going to use that template to work with the street division to also start gathering data on what they do on a day-to-day basis as well and track that.
Because I was sort of surprised that, some of these things which seem like very general goals, creating maintenance work plans and schedules and service standards, that said not started. Because obviously we have, maintenance plans in place. We've had the CMRP in place for quite a while now, and, maybe that's a more high-level plan, and we need to have some of the minutia filled in, and that hasn't been started?
I think some of this has to do with working on the vehicles and maintenance plans like that. I think staff does what they do. They react to vehicles coming in, for instance, that need repair or need some service or another, but there's documentation of when that happens, but there's not necessarily proactive maintenance plan for that stuff. It's more, we've got one mechanic that handles that and has to deal with managing our entire fleet. So he's, like a lot of public works, pretty reactive and does a nice job in reacting to what comes into him, but doesn't have a lot of time to be proactive, and Justin's going to help support that and work with, in that case, Fern, to develop some maintenance plans for the vehicles and equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alderman Davalos.
Yes, maybe this has been done, but I just want to say publicly that I'm very happy that number 22 has been accomplished and that we have the program analyst. And I would like to welcome Justin. This was something I was really in favor of. So thank you for getting it done, and I look forward to seeing how things are going to run very smoothly. So welcome.
Okay, that was information only, so there's nothing under miscellaneous, and there's no closed session this evening, and all I need is a motion to adjourn. Alderman Goodman?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good evening.